Most jiu-jitsu players pull guard for one simple reason. They suck at takedowns. No matter how many different takedowns or techniques they practice in class, when it comes to rolling, they are very rarely able to find any success without being sprawled on, countered, or taken down first. If this is you, we're going to dive into some... Dude, why can't I say words in front of a camera? This is retarded. If this is you, we're going to dive into some simple concepts that we went over at the lab this week that are going to help you understand why your takedowns aren't working, and to give you some simple ideas that are easy to follow that will help you look more like a grappler and less like a dog with worms. So this week at the lab, we focused on our stand-up, specifically getting better at taking shots. Now, instead of just drilling single legs or different techniques that are related to shots, we played 2 different games to help develop this skill. The first game, this is a warm-up game that I do at the beginning of every class when it comes to practicing anything to do with takedowns. It's a very simple but effective game. The offensive player has to start with a 2-hand connection to the defensive player. Now, it can be anywhere. It can be on the hand, their arm, around their waist, upper body. They can be grabbing a leg, around the head. Anyway, as long as you have a 2-handed connection to the defensive player, you're good. The offensive player's goal is to finish a takedown from that connection. So that means you can't go from 2-on-1 wrist grip to a body lock and then hit that takedown. If you want the body lock, start with the body lock. The defensive player's goal is to dismantle and disconnect from that connection. The constraint for them is to not try and prevent or stop the takedown in any way. It's only to disconnect from the connection that they start with. The reason for that is we're training 2 different skills, both offensively and defensively. For the offense, I want my guys to be decisive. If you're going to make a connection, know what it is that you have from that connection before you make it, and already have an idea in mind so that you can take action on it as soon as possible. I want to see my guys committing not only to the connection that they make, but to the takedown that they think they have available as fast as possible. The reason the defensive player's objective isn't don't get taken down, but instead try and dismantle that connection is if you're taking too long or you're lollygagging to finish and start a takedown, I just want them to strip the grip and then reset the game. However, the skill I want the defensive player to develop, especially for newer students, is to just get used to falling and breaking that fall. So I don't want them trying to prevent or resist the takedown in any way, because it's just to get used to moving and getting brought down to the ground. A large majority of injuries we see in the gym or in the training room come from falling body weight, generally on the player that's being taken down. And this is because we spend all of our lives trying to not fall over. When it happens and we're not used to it, we start reacting in very unpredictable ways. Maybe we stiffen our legs and try and stay up on our feet. Maybe we hop around just trying to prevent the inevitable. Or maybe as we're falling, we post those hands out and trying to stop ourselves from actually hitting the ground. All of these are terrible and are liable to get us injured and have us probably not coming back to do jiu-jitsu ever again. This game is specifically designed to help those newer players who are just terrified of falling, which is why they avoid stand-up, because they're worried about falling over. So this is to help them get comfortable in this environment. And we don't move past this game until I'm happy that everyone is making less and less mistakes when it comes to breaking their fall. Once we played a couple of games of that and I was happy that people were falling correctly, we moved on to game 2. This is definitely more of a direct shot-focused game. For the offensive player to get the win, they have to lift the defensive player's leg off the ground. This has to be properly secured. You can't just lift the foot off the ground and think that's a win. You have to have the leg tight to you and lift it so that they can't just push it back through and get it to the ground again. The defensive player's goal and definitive win is if they can sprawl on the offensive player and stuff their takedown attempt, that's a win. Or if the offensive player is able to make a connection to the leg and you're able to get that leg back down to the ground and strip their connections as they're trying to lift it, that's also a definitive win for the defensive player. The constraint for the defensive player is they aren't allowed to move around. They have to pick a staggered stance, either left foot leading or right foot leading, and their rear foot is planted firmly on the ground. So if their left foot is the lead foot, they can move that left foot backwards and forwards again, but that right foot is going to stay rooted into the ground. They can't move and circle and do all those things. The reason for this constraint is the idea of the game is to give the offensive player plenty of time to practice a bunch of different shots and to give the defensive player plenty of opportunities to either practice the sprawl or deal with the shot once it's happened. If we just spend 2 minutes running around in a circle or running away from our training partners, we're not getting to practice as many shots or counters to those shots as we would if we didn't have the constraint. The idea is still to build skills within these games, not to do what we would just do when we're rolling. I'd much rather my guys get 10 or 20 shots in within those 2 minutes so that the defensive player player gets 10 or 20 shots to react to, rather than only firing off 3 or 4 because they're spending a bunch of time spinning around like that scene in the Titanic. And so in the first game, we generally seen what I was expecting to see, a lot of really lazy shots, if you can call them that. Essentially, guys were just bending forward at the hips, reaching their arms out, hoping to grab onto the leg and pull it up using their lower back muscles mainly. Surprisingly, or more accurately, frustratingly, some of it was working. Mainly because the defensive players didn't have a good enough understanding on both how to stuff takedown attempts and how to sprawl properly. This opened the door to the first conceptual lessons of the day. So the first concept we looked at was how to sprawl correctly. Instead of tensing the leg up, hoping that somehow makes it heavier, spoiler, it doesn't, or trying to run away and just get those hips away from the offensive player as fast as possible, which inevitably ends up making the leg lighter, we looked at the idea of hipping into the opponent first, matching their momentum with our own momentum, creating this force delete, if you will. What also happens as I shift my hip forward, it goes directly over that front leg, which makes it very heavy and difficult to just lift from their lower back if they haven't taken a very good shot. Once we've essentially cancelled the momentum with our hip, we've essentially chambered a sprawl. So when we decide to shoot the sprawl, it is way more effective at flattening them out rather than just trying to put our weight on them and hoping that it pushes them to the ground. Cancelling that momentum and then moving with it creates a really nice sprawl that gets them down to the ground faster than simply just trying to put weight on them and hoping that we flatten them out. This simple idea immediately punished everyone who was taking lazy shots. We went from seeing people lifting the leg, even though they were doing everything incorrectly, to pretty much everyone getting sprawled on every time they did that. This brought us onto the second concept of the lesson. Wrestling is hard. There's no easy or lazy jiu-jitsu way around your wrestling. Trying to be lazy with bad posture guarantees that finishing the takedown is going to be very, very difficult. If you can accept the idea that wrestling is hard work, you can front load the hard work by doing the difficult movements first that make the takedown easier to concede at the end. This brought us onto some better and simple shot mechanics that front load that hard work, making the takedown easier to concede at the end. Simple ideas like using a real level change and getting a knee down to the ground before we start reaching for the leg. Keeping your head above your hips for a nice strong posture. Taking a good penetrative shot so that we get close to the leg so that we don't have to reach far for it, we can reach shallow. Bringing the leg tight to our body so I don't have to lift it, I can just stand with it. We played with those concepts for a couple of games and seen a huge improvement in our shots. But as we're getting better at these shots, so are the defensive players at recognizing these shots and using the concepts that we learned to both stuff and prevent and counter these takedowns. The reason the defensive player was still succeeding at preventing some of these takedowns, even though they were front loading some of the hard work, is because their hips are still involved. Something we talk about all the time at the lab is jiu-jitsu, or wrestling in this case, is a battle of hip dominance. If I can get my hips into the dominant position, even as the defensive player, I'm going to win that game. So another way that we can front load the work in this instance is to get behind the hip, taking it out of the defensive equation for the defensive player. The demonstration that we used for this concept was using something like a swing single. We used all the same things that we just looked at: a level change, nice penetrative shot with the knee to the ground, but instead of immediately looking to take the leg with it still in front of us and the hip still being in play, we take a big back step in a swing single so that our hips are now aligned behind our opponent's hips. This makes the leg not only very easy to lift from this position, but finishing the takedown even easier because their hip is not involved in the defensive process. We're likely going to see an immediate takedown, or maybe they just try and reach their hands to the ground to prevent any further problems, but we're still taking them down. This led to a huge improvement in the guys who were really willing to front load the hard work. The guys who were really looking to work hard, they really seen a lot of improvement in the last couple of games with that. The main issue that we've seen throughout the whole lesson, even towards the end, is just guys reaching out, just extending their arms way before their knees hit the ground and just telegraphing which leg they're going for and what it is they're doing, but committing to the wrong thing. And what I mean by committing to the wrong thing is my guys were committing to the leg that they want or the specific takedown that they want and not the shot, not the right position. We talk about things in jiu-jitsu like position over submission or everything else. A strong position is where we create a strong offense from. When you start extending your arms away from your body, you weaken your posture, you weaken your position. And so when you reach out ahead of the shot, you've moved into a weak position. If that leg moves, which it's liable to do so, that leg has no obligation to stay where it is just because you've decided that's the leg that you want to hit a single leg on. When it moves out the way and you've committed to it, it's going to be very hard to adjust and adapt and move on to the next thing. However, if you prioritize and commit not to the leg, but to the shot that you're going to take, you do your level change, you get that knee to the ground. If that leg moves before you reach out to it, you're going to find it very easy to switch off to the opposite leg and adapt to the situation so that you can carry on playing and still work towards your takedown. Now, I had guys come up to me at the end of the lesson being like, oh, I still feel like I'm reaching sometimes. And I explained, when I give you these ideas and when I give you the concepts, my expectation as a coach isn't that you're going to do it perfect every time from now on just because I explained it. There's a level of repetition and practice that you have to implement in order for this to become subconscious, in order for it to become just something you do instinctively. All I expect from this point as a coach is when you start making these mistakes, that you're able to observe why that mistake led to a failure. Why, when you reached your arms out, they found it easier to sprawl and prevent that takedown attempt. Just being able to acknowledge what went wrong and why is going to allow you to start adjusting what it is you try and how you try to do it as you start moving forward as a grappler. So this class actually isn't about becoming a really good wrestler or even actually getting good at shooting or sprawling. The real lesson is an adjustment of our mindset when we're in the gym. It's about learning how to learn. I don't expect anyone to get good at any of these things within one lesson, within even two. My real goal is for you to start noticing when you're making a mistake and why it's leading to a failure, whether that's reaching, bending at the hips, or not getting behind the hip, whatever it is. Having the awareness of why it's leading to a failure and letting it mentally or subconsciously adjust what it is you're going to try the next time is how you learn and get better at grappling. And if you can do that with everything that you learn, it's going to lead to really significant progress. You have to get better at being able to just recognize your mistakes for what they are, just mistakes that you have from a lapse of experience or knowledge, and just make those adjustments as you grow in experience. So a few of you are coming up to me in class and telling me that you've watched these a couple times through and this, that, and the other. If you have questions, just comment it below and I can prepare an answer for you that might be a little bit more concise and thought about than just trying to answer them on the fly. Leave it down below and I can either respond to you directly or I can put it into my lesson plan next time I go over these types of things to cover those points specifically. But other than that, the lesson went really well. Everyone worked really hard. It was good to see everyone pushing each other and recognizing that just wrestling, and the reason people avoid it for the most part is because it's difficult and a lot of grapplers are lazy. But if you want to be a better grappler, lazy has to be a word that people can't use to describe you. You have to be active, athletic, and willing to work hard.